A lot of this spiritual depression is a consequence of bypassing something we already know to be true. And life does get increasingly sucky to our own benefit to wake us up to the fact that we're not in alignment. We're holding on to something we don't need, and we know we don't need it. There's something else we'd rather be doing but aren't. Maybe it's out of fear. Maybe it's, we don't feel worthy, we don't feel ready. Regardless, if it's calling us, we are ready, we are worthy, and it is time. Hey, what's going on, my friends, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Victor, and today I'm going to share with you signs that you are experiencing spiritual depression, and most importantly, how to snap out of it, how to use it, how to use this depressed, contracted state for your expansion, for your own benefit. That's the point. Number one, you feel totally stuck in your life. You feel stuck. You're never stuck, obviously, but it can feel like you're stuck in your life circumstance. No way out, no light at the end of the tunnel. What comes to mind for me is years ago, before I got onto YouTube, I had a different job and I lived in a different state, different home, different friends, different everything, a different life basically. And I found myself really yearning for something more depth, more purpose. And I started to kind of even have an idea of what that looked like. And for me at the time, I wanted to move my family and I from Michigan to San Diego, where I envisioned myself doing this, sharing on YouTube, and not being so weighed down by this sort of life circumstance. And as I was dreaming and sort of envisioning this and feeling a resonance with this idea, the possibility of actually doing that seemed more bleak than ever before because we were financially strapped. For quite a while, my very wealthy father-in-law gave my wife and I a credit card with pretty much no limit. We could buy whatever we want and do whatever we want with it within reason. And all of a sudden during that time, he started to take it away. He stopped paying the bill more and more and more. And every month it was less and less and less and less. And when my dreams were the strongest to go, the guard was gone. And all of a sudden we found ourselves pretty much in a very bad financial situation. So we felt stuck. We felt like we have this thing we want to do, but we can't do it. We just can't. Look at the numbers, look at the paper. It's not possible. But here's the thing, my friends. As you know, but it bears repeating, you're never stuck. And what ended up happening is that financially challenging situation combined with this strong dream to do this other thing and go in this other direction in my life, what it created was me evolving myself on all levels, spiritually, emotionally, physically, even learning certain business type of skills. It forced me. This dream was in fact strong enough to force me to figure it out. And it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't easy, quite frankly. It was very hard, but I did it. And I'm so glad I did it because now I've shown myself just what I'm made of. So anytime now I'm stuck, I know it's an opportunity to level up myself and rise to the occasion, even if it takes some time. Knowing that the long-term benefits of unsticking myself from what seems like an impossible scenario, it's life-changing long-term. Number two, something in your life is weighing you down big time. At that time in my life, for me, it was this medical marijuana grow operation. Something I did in my basement. It was a big chunk of my income. It was like a job of mine. I was a medical marijuana grower, it's a legal grower. And it's a fun thing, and I still sometimes miss it. I miss growing weed, honestly. I loved it. But it just became this really physically draining and stressful thing to deal with. I started running into a lot of random problems with the grow, and I found that one way or the other, even though on paper it seemed like I could get this thing dialed in to where it was kind of hands off, it never became that way. It never did. There's always something heavy, physically draining I had to deal with, whether it's a flood in the basement, whether there's some kind of like root disease, which I ran into, which required me to like do a lot of manual labor, multiple times a day to flush it out. And then that would resolve itself and something else would happen and I'd be backed up on this. And it was always me spending hours of time with the grow operation. And it never became easy like I had hoped. And now there's nothing wrong, obviously, with hard work, but it made it very impossible to go into my flow and do something new and to pursue my dreams. I didn't have the time or the energy for it because something was weighing me down, something I thought I needed, but come to find I didn't. And one day I just chopped the plants down and on blind faith. And then 6 months later, I was living my dream in San Diego, doing exactly what I envisioned, but I had to let go first. Number 3, you might feel abandoned by your intuition. Just when you feel the most stuck and the most hopeless, you would think your intuition would be there to like comfort you and to guide you. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way. What comes to mind is a conversation I had the other day with a very, very powerful and experienced plant medicine shaman. He was talking about ayahuasca in particular. He was saying that, he said what he noticed with people and himself, when they stop really doing the work outside of ceremony, when they stop taking the advice, you could say, of the ayahuasca stopped teaching. He said he experienced this for years where he would drink the medicine and like nothing would happen. And after a long time, he finally asked them, he finally said, why don't you help me anymore? Where'd you go? Great spirit of ayahuasca? And then he said the plant medicine kind of came in, kind of almost forcefully, and showed him right in his face a pack of cigarettes, like this image of a pack of cigarettes. And the insinuation was, I told you years ago what you gotta do and you haven't done it. Well, how can you expect me to give you more steps when you haven't done the first one? Quit smoking and then we'll talk. It's kind of the vibe of that experience. And I've had that happen too, where it feels like my intuition's gone, but really it already gave me what it needed to do. I'm just not doing it. And to my own defense and your own defense, if that's you, it's because we don't feel comfortable doing it. We don't feel safe. We don't feel trusting enough to take the next step that we already know is there. But in order for our intuition to click back on, we have to. And that was what it was for me with the medical marijuana grow operation I just got done talking about. I felt abandoned by my higher self. I'd get mad. I would like yell at like the spirit guide sometimes out of just frustration. I felt abandoned. But the whole time it was like, no, you're not listening. We already told you what to do. And once I chopped those plants down, even though it was scary, it was very scary, I've talked about it before, that's when all the downloads and guidance came right back. Number 4, you might find yourself creatively fatigued. Maybe you're an artist or a creator or a writer or a whatever. We're all artists in a sense. We all have the ability in one form or another to channel through creative energy into some type of product or result or physicalized expression, as you know. And this is something that gives us great joy and satisfaction. But during these periods of spiritual depression, at least I found that there is no creative energy coming through. I'm not inspired to do anything. And that can be, for me especially, very depressing. Very, very depressing. Very like, oh man. I just wish. I would sometimes try to do so. I'd try to write or I'd try to make a video. And there was just nothing behind it. No spiritual inspiration or guidance at all behind it. It was my mind just trying to desperately do something, with nothing behind it. And that it can be very, very depressing. But again, we have this happen to us when we're off track. A lot of this spiritual depression is a consequence of bypassing something we already know to be true. And life does get increasingly sucky to our own benefit to wake us up to the fact that we're not in alignment. We're holding on to something we don't need, and we know we don't need it. There's something else we'd rather be doing but aren't. Maybe it's out of fear. Maybe it's, we don't feel worthy, we don't feel ready. Regardless, if it's calling us, we are ready, we are worthy, and it is time. But the point is, we have all these consequences sort of stack up to make life sucky enough to finally motivate us to go for this next step in our journey, which is waiting for us. It's ripe, it's there for the taking. It's just us needing to do it. Number 5, just kind of emphasize ignoring something we know to be true, even if we don't know why we know it to be true. And I'll give it the example, which I've shared many times, about my medical marijuana plants. I had the knowing. It was so clear, so obvious that I need to stop doing this. I need to let the grow operation go in order to continue to progress spiritually and also in my life. And I also knew that if I didn't do that, things were just going to continue to get worse and worse, as they did. But because my mind insisted that we need this is the only way the family makes money, I'd be irresponsible for cutting it down. All these different reasons, which are valid, they're not illogical. They were on paper very much true. But when you go through a spiritual awakening, you start to have the option to go through life guided from a deeper knowing. And that deeper knowing sometimes does defy what seems to be the logic, because that deeper knowing, it sees all of what you think you see, and this over here, which you're blind to, and this up ahead, and the person you're going to meet 3 months from now that has something to say that's going to spark something in you that calls you to go over here. And it's like this knowing encompasses all of that. And sometimes it's hard for the mind to get on board with that. But what we are given is this sense of knowingness that something is true. And when we don't live our life in accordance with what we know to be true, there are problems. So spiritual depression, much like regular depression, in my opinion, is not something to see a doctor or a YouTuber to diagnose and cure. It's something to ask, it's something to beg the question, why? Why have I created all these symptoms, all these problems, all these sort of undesirable manifestations? Why have I created them? And when you can start taking ownership of your life, including the spiritual depression, and asking why, you might start getting the answer. The answer might be very simple and clear. The answer has probably already been with you this entire time, but you've been hoping to avoid it, skip over it, wait for more clarity, wait for more direction, wait for things to feel a little safer. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. I'll leave you with this. It's an analogy that I've lived my entire life by. Not the entire life, but the past 15 years of my life. It's inspired by Bashar. Bashar is like a channeler. Bashar would always have this quote that would say, you always know what you need to know when you need to know it, but oftentimes not before. I knew I had to cut the grow down. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew that was the next step. What I've learned is that this life journey after you start to go through a spiritual awakening is very similar to walking through a cave with many different options, tunnels, caverns, pitfalls, and all you have is this little lantern. This little lantern gives off a little bit of light, not a lot, not as much as you would like. You don't know if you're about to run into a freaking vampire bat or fall down a goddamn shaft or cliff. You don't know. All you know is that you can see your feet. That's it. But you see enough. You see enough to know that, okay, I can step forward maybe a foot. And what I've learned is that when you take action, when you take that next step that's already illuminated by your intuition, then the second step suddenly comes into your awareness. And then you take that step, and then another step, and then another step, and another step, and another step. And the blessing is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know all the ins and outs, the architecture of the cave you're in. No, you just got to take the next logical, obvious, commonsensical, intuitive step that you've known about maybe for a long freaking time. Take the step. And it's not going to all make sense, but you'll get another step and another and another and another. And that's how it works. And I started living my life that way, and it's hard. It is hard. It is scary. It requires a lot of faith. But what I've learned is that when you do that, that's when you can create masterpieces in your life. That's when you can blow your own mind at who you can become, how quickly and to what degree you can change and evolve and become more connected with your true self, and your life becomes this expression of your truth and just surrounds you with all your ideal stuff, people, circumstance, abundance, freedom. All of it comes from that, but it requires going through life in a completely different way. Living faith in a way that most people just talk about, but don't actually do. It's time to do it if you're watching this video. Your spiritual depression is a blessing. It's showing you that you could be doing way better, that you are more than that, you are capable of more. And you're gonna stay depressed, quite frankly, until you start living up to your own potential.